Okay, members who have just joined, we have just begun, and this is where we are. So we are starting straight away from where we stopped at in the previous class. In the previous class, we discussed about functions. We stopped at functions, and we say that a function is a piece of code that is written, and you only execute it when it is required. For example, we say that in real world, we can compare functions with things that we use. For example, assets, or things that we use. For example, if you buy a spoon, you'll only use a spoon when you need it. If you buy a phone, you'll only use a phone when you need it. If you buy a bed, you'll only use a bed when you need it. So those things are just like what? They're just like functions in programming. If you buy a spoon and you don't use it, it means that that spoon will always be there, but it will not do its work until you use it. Likewise, when you create a function and you don't use it, that function will always be there. And it will not do what? It will not do its work until you do what? Until you use it. I'm going to start afresh and create a new file of function, and then I will see how we can proceed. So I'm going to delete this one that we had created before, and I'm going to create a new file of functions here. So I'll simply come here and right click and say new file, and say number 10, and say functions dot. So there we go. So advantage of function, it helps us to not repeat ourselves, write a code just only a single time, and then you're able to reuse it. Another importance of function is that you write your code will not be loaded into the system until it is what? Until it is required. Otherwise, if you don't write functions, then mean that every line that you load into the system, even though you're not going to use it, will be loaded in the memory, and the problem will be your application will start becoming slow. Why? Because you wrote it badly. Even things that you're not going to use, they're being loaded into memory. So let us see how you write functions. For example, you're going to write a function that is going to that's going to add two numbers, and then what? And then display them. Okay, we're going to write we're going to have to begin with just a simple function. A function without arguments, and this function will just display our name. So let me write a function that will just say my name. So to write a function that will just simply say my name, I'll just going to simply say void. So what is meant by void, we will discuss it. And then after saying void, we're going to say function. Void, then we give the name of this function. Say underscore my underscore name. You cannot write the function with spaces. The name of a function must not have space, okay? And cannot have this dash. It can have an underscore, but not what? Not a dash. So after doing that, let me zoom so you can see clearly. After doing that, I'm going to go ahead and then open my bracket. So you open the bracket and then you open the curly bracket. So that is the structure of a function. That's how we write functions. So as we can see, this function is called say my name. Okay, it's called say my name. So let me put here a comment. An argumented function. That's how we call them. This function does not have an argument. So after doing that, this function is going to just simply say our name. So to say our name, of course, just simply say print and say my name is Mohindo. Okay, so that's the use of this function. So what does it mean? Here it is just like you have bought your car and it is there. So when you create a function and you don't use it, you're just like I've purchased something and it is there. So it will not do its work until when you do what? When you use it or when you call it. So this is how what we call defining a what? Defining a function. Then after doing that, let us go ahead and write our main function, because our main function, it is where it is the one that the operating system will call for our program to start executing. Otherwise, if you write a program without main function, then you'll have just write something without a heart. So let's go ahead and create that. So to create a main function, just simply say void main, and then like this, and then like that. So if I do like this, nothing is going to be displayed on our screen. Yet we have this my name is Mohindo. Why will it not display? Is because of just created a function and we have not called it. So let's go ahead and run this file. So I'll open my terminal and then clear it, and then run this file, which by simply saying dat and then say 10 functions. Okay, so let's go ahead and run that. You can see nothing is being displayed. And why there is nothing being displayed, you know the reason. We created the function, but we did not call it. It will only display only when we call it. So here, just like you've bought a bed, but you're not sleeping on it. So you will only use it. It will only work when you do what? When you sleep on it. Okay. So let's go ahead and run this function. So to run this function, we call it. So to call a function, we just simply write it like that. You just write its name, and then you open bracket and close it, the normal bracket, and then you put a semicolon. So by doing like this, it's going to bring this code that we wrote in this file and then execute it from here. So let us go ahead and run that. So what are you expecting? We are going to expect my name is Muhindo in the what? In the screen. Why? Because we called it. So if I come and clear the screen and run this file, you can see my name is Muhindo. So why? Because we call this function. So you can even call a function multiple times. You see, I'm calling it around 7 times. I save. So every time I call it, it will come and execute this function, this code, and again and again and again until I'm done. You see. So let's go ahead and do that and run and see what will happen. So when I run, you see, the number of times that I call the function, it did the same thing. I hope at this point you have understood the basics of function and why we need function. You may not understand how we have created it, but you should understand that a function will save us not to repeat a piece of code multiple times. You write your function one time, and then you reuse it again and again to perform the same thing that you would have liked it to do. So this is a function, and its work is to do what? Is just to display the name. I'll share this source code with you when you reach GitHub. When you start learning about GitHub, I'll share this source code with you so that you can even follow along or maybe use it for your own purposes. So after doing that, this one we call it an augmented function. So why are we calling it an augmented function? We are calling it an augmented function because it is not taking a function. It is not taking anything. We are just calling it, and it is statically do what is inside it. So it's not taking anything. But assume that our name is dynamic. For example, I want to print 6 names. So what does it mean? It means that I'll have to write 6 functions. So this function is not dynamic. So if you want to write a function that is dynamic, you can use arguments. So it means that it will be receiving new data, and then that function will be using that data to perform what it's supposed to do. So those functions that receive data, we call them augmented functions. Okay, why are they augmented? Because they take arguments. So let us go ahead and create an augmented function. To do it, just simply write void and then write the name of the function. Say let us call it display name. Display name. So this function, it's going to receive something. So we write it just like the way we wrote the other, but it's going to receive what? It's going to receive something. Why? Because it does not know the name that you want to say. So if you want to receive something, like if you say that if you want to use this function, you must give it something, then you have to give it arguments. So arguments, you just simply write the data type, and then you do what? You receive something. So I'm going to put here an argument. So I'll come here between these brackets, between here, and I write what I want. So if you want me to display for you name, so this function say that if you want me to display you the name, then you must tell me the what? The name. Then I'll be able to display for you. So whoever calls this function, he must give it a name so that he should be able to display that name. So that name, of course, is a string. So write string, and then we give it maybe name, or give it maybe text, or give it data. So to call this function, you see, when we call this function here, when we called it, we did not give it anything. But here, to call this one, we must give it what? We must give it some data. So this function is going to use the data that has been sent to it and display it on screen. And then say, by simply saying print, and say your name is, and then $, then the data. So you see, this function is dynamic. We'll be giving it something, and whatever we give it, it displays it. So this function that receives something, we call them what? augmented functions. So let us go ahead and run this file. So to run this file, we'll just simply say we call the function, of course. So you see I commented this one so that it should not do anything. So it will be there but to not do anything. This time I'm going to call this one that displays a what? That displays a name. So this one, what it's going to do is we are going to call it by simply saying display name, and then we give it some data. You see, it is bringing an error. Why? Because it is expecting something. You can see one positional argument expected. So if I do like this, the program will not run. Why? Because this function that I've called, I must give it something. So let me go ahead and give it something by saying Abeku Charles. See? So it will receive this data that I've sent to it, and then it will display it from here. So let me go ahead and run that. So it's a dynamic function. So if I run it, can you see? Your name is this one. So if I change this name from here, so it means that this function, I can use it to print even different names. Okay? So let me use to print these different names. So I'm going to call this function multiple times. You see? I call that one with that name. I call another function with a name maybe like Robert. I call this function again with a name like maybe Muhindo. So you see, this function, I just call the same function, but I give it different data. So this function uses that data to display it. Okay, so if I run this file again, so you can see your name is this one, your name is this one, your name is this one. So I write a piece of code only one time and I'm able to reuse it. And that's the power of what? Of function. So these functions that take data, we call them what? Augmented functions. So let me go ahead and comment that one also. So members, I hope you've understood what is meant by augmented functions. We proceed to returning functions. What are returning functions? Returning functions, they are functions that we expect something from them. For example, you can write a function that is going to calculate average of some numbers. So you give it some data and then it processes for you some the average, and then gives you what? The response. So the functions that return something, we call them returning functions. So let me go ahead and show you how we create returning function. So I'm going to call this one returning functions. So to do that, we are going to simply say what we're expecting from this function. For example, let us do something a little bit unique. Let us get something from the console. Okay, let us save that one. Okay, let's do a function that will add two numbers. Okay, that will add two numbers and then give us the answer. So if a function is going to add two numbers, or do the logic of adding two numbers, what does it mean? It means that function will expect something from it, and when you're creating that function, you have to specify what you're expecting from that function. So if we want a function that's going to add two numbers, what does it mean? Then we'll be expecting what? An integer from that function. So let's go ahead and create a function that will add two numbers and then give what? And then give us the answer. So if I will give you a task and I ask you to do a function that will multiply two numbers and give the answer, you should be able to do that. If I ask you to write a function that will find an average between a certain number, maybe three numbers, you should be able to do that once I create this one of what? Of adding two numbers. So to create a function that's going to add two numbers, first of all, we begin by what is promising us. So if a function is going to add two numbers, of course it's going to promise an integer. So you see this function, we are not returning anything. So we wrote a void beginning here at the beginning. So that's the meaning. So the void means that this function, we are not expecting anything from it. Its work is just to display. But if you're expecting something from function, then you must begin with what you're expecting from it. So I'm expecting an integer from this function that's going to add two numbers. So I'll simply write int first, okay? Int. And then after, I'm going to write the name of the function. So I can say add numbers, or I can say add numbers. I can call it anything, okay? Add numbers, okay? So I'm going to open the bracket and then open curly bracket, and then I'll have to return. So you can see this function is already complaining, is already giving, it's already crying. Why is it crying? It's crying because we promised that we return an integer and we have not returned it. So it's warning you that, hey, I'll not proceed before you return what you promised. So let us go ahead and create just a local variable here. A local variable is a variable defined inside the function. So I'm going to create here an integer. I'm going to call it answer, and I'm going to initialize it to 0. So I've created an integer called answer and initialize it to 0. So I'm going to return it, okay, so that it should be okay. So I'm going to return here. So I'll just simply say return and then return the answer. So the function is no longer crying. Why? Because we promised that we'll return an integer here. We promised that we'll return an integer, and at the end of the day, we returned what? An integer. Why? Because we created here an integer, then we initialized it, and then return an answer. So you can see it's no longer crying. Why? Because we are returning what we promised. But this function is not complete to what we want it to do. So it's going to add two numbers. So what does it mean? It means that it must have some arguments. We must give it two numbers that we want this function to add for us. So we're going to create here now. We're going to put here multiple arguments. So to create a function that has multiple arguments, you should see clearly, because I'm going to design for you a task that is going to have these things related but different. And this task will be a little bit, I will follow it to make sure that everyone did it. So I'm going to put here arguments. So to add two numbers, it means that I must expect two numbers. So what I expect, I write it here. So I say I'm expecting an integer. So I write int, I'm going to call it a, and then put comma and another integer. So I say int b. So you can see when you call this function, it means that you must give it a and b, so that it should be able to do what you want or what it's supposed to do. So once I have these integers here, this is just like declaring two integers. So I'm going to add them and store them in answer. So I'm going to say answer equals to a plus b. So that's going to happen. It's going to get the value of a and put it here, the value of b and put it here, and then sum them up and store them in answer. And once finishing answer, we return that answer. So that is how we create what? Augmented functions, and that's how you separate a comma. You separate using comma with a function that is going to take multiple arguments. So let's go ahead and now call this function. So to call this function, I can just simply say, I can call it straight in the printing line, or I can even call it within what? Outside the printing line. So I'm going to just call it within printing line. So I'm going to say print. Okay, let me just simply say int answer equals. So I'm going to call this function that's going to sum for us some two variables. So I'm going to call it here, and then I give it what I want it to do, add for me. So if I put here 33, I put comma 21. So put semicolon. So what does it mean? It means that I'm calling this function. It is going to get 33 and store it here, and get 21 and store it here, and then create a new integer called answer, and then get the value of a, which is 33, and the value of 21, which is what? Which is 20. I mean the value of b, which is 21, and then sum them up and then store them in integer. I mean in this answer, and then return them. So you see here, I'm saying here int answer equals. So I'm saying this integer equals to this function. So this is valid because it has been promised by these add numbers that whoever calls me, I'll give him back a what? An integer. So you see here, this is the promise that we are promising. Like whoever calls me, I'll give you back an integer. And then this is what it takes. But for me to give you an integer, you must give me two integers. So I give you two integers, then to be able to add and then give me what I expected from it. So if I want to display this, I can just simply say print and then put the answer. So if I save, you see there's no error. So I'm going to run it and save and then clean and then run it. So you can see 54, and that is the value of adding 32 plus 21. Another way, you can as well call this very function within a what? Within a string. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to comment this one, and I will share with you this so you can read it later. So let's go ahead and call it in another way. You can as well say print, and then you open bracket, and then maybe I'm going to put here. I can as well even initialize here some values, maybe int x equals to 11 and y equals to 16. So let's go ahead and run this. So I'm going to simply say print, and then put here what I want to see. So I'm going to say open the double quotes, and I'm going to say $x plus $y equals. So I'm going to put open curly bracket. So if you're calling a curly bracket, if you call a function, you must put a what? A curly bracket. So here, I'm going to call the function straight. Okay? I'm going to call the function straight from where it is. So I'm going to simply say add what? Add numbers. Okay? And then I'm going to give it the value of a and b. X. So I will simply pass my x and pass here my y, and then put a semicolon. Then it means that here the value of x will be substituted. Here the value of y is going to be substituted, and then it's going to add these numbers, and then it will going to call this function, and the function we're giving it x and y, so it's going to perform the logic of add these two numbers and return to us the answer. So if I save, I run this, so you can see 11 plus 16 equals to 21. So it means that we have created a simple function that can perform for us the logic of adding two numbers. Okay? So you can create, this is just a very basic example, but there are so many possibilities of what you can use to function. So you can use function to create very complex code. You see this one is having how many lines? Just like 3 lines. But you can write even 50 lines in just one function, even more than 50, as huge as you want, just within one function, and then to do the logic, and then that function will always return, or it will always execute only when you do what? Only when you call it. Let me create just another function that is going to join for me some two words. And that's going to be the last one. So to create a function that's going to join some two words, so I'm going to just simply put join two words. So of course a word is a string. So you must expect a string from this function. So I'm just going to simply begin with with a string. And then since it's going to join for us I give it a name. Okay? So I'm going to say join words. Okay? Open the bracket and close it. And then since it's going to join some words or some two words, what does it mean? It means that we must give it those two words that we want that function to join for us. So let me give it two words. So I can simply say John. Sorry, I don't do it from here. I have to write like I'm expecting two words for me to do something for you. So I'll simply say string and say maybe word 1, and then put comma, again string, and say word 2. So what does it mean here? We are putting rules and say whoever calls us, he must provide us two words, the first word and the second word. And then we will use those words to do what? To display them what they want. So let's go ahead and display them. So another way you may not even first initialize. You see here, they will initialize this thing, like answer. But another way, you can just simply say return a plus b. It will do the same thing. So here, what I'm going to do, I'm just going to return because I don't want again to first initialize, yet I have a shortcut. So I'll simply say return and then put $sign. So what the use of this function is just to join two strings. So I'll just simply put $sign w1, put space, put $sign w2. So what's going to happen? It's going to get the value of this w1 and put it here in this string. You see, I have the quotes. When you see quotes, just know that is what is string. It's going to get the value of w1, which is word 1, and put it in here, and get the value of second word and put it here. And immediately after doing this, it straight away returns. You see, it returns, and returning means that the function is done and you're returning the response. So another way, you could first create another string variable and then join them, and then after join them, you return the response. But this is the simplest way and the fancy way of doing things. Instead of first initializing, we just simply go ahead and return. So let's go ahead and call these functions. So let me comment this one so you can always come to it and practice when I'll share with you this code. So let us call this function. So to call this function, I'm just simply going to say print and then put the name of the function, which is join words, and then I give it two words that I want it to join. So between here, I can put Joan, and then after, then I put a comma. You see, I just also want to print directly to what to display. Then after putting Joan, I'll come ahead and put here a comma and then give it the second name, because this function expects what? Expects second name. So I can put do and save. So it means that this function will be called first and then be given Joan and do. So it will do its magic, it will do what's supposed to do, and then return to us the response. And you know the use of this one is to join this, is to join what? The use of this join words is to join what? Is to join words, and then go ahead and print them even straight without storing them somewhere. So that is the point of what? Of functions. So let's go ahead and run. So to run this file, I'll just simply come and run it. So can you see? This function we're able to do what? To perform for us the join task. So that's it about functions, and that's all you may want to know when you're beginning to learn functions. So I hope you've understood, and if you don't understand, you can rewatch a video again, and hopefully you'll understand. Then I'll share a video. I'll share a task that will change just these things slightly, and then request you to do what? And then I'll request you to do what? To try those tasks, and then whoever who tries, I will try to go through your questions. Your solutions. So let us proceed to classes. But before we proceed to classes, you will allow me to first go and have a cup of water, and then I come back just in 2 minutes. Okay. So resume our clock. 20 minutes gone. Okay, so that's how we create functions, and
Yes, we are still on.
okay,
Here.
that is great, Mr. Umar. Okay, that's how we create functions, and that's how we implement functions. So let's go ahead and look at classes. So classes is where the object-oriented programming starts.
Yes. Yep. Yeah.
It's where the object-oriented programming starts. What is a class? A class is a blueprint of an object, or I can simply say a class is a house just like the way you can build a house and then you're planning to store their things. So that's what we call a class. Now I want you to listen very, 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 very carefully here. If you new in programming, most especially if you're new in programming, I want you to listen very, very carefully. A class is okay. We know different data types of that programming. If you still remember them, we discussed about data types. Data types, we say these are possible things that that programming can do can store for you, or when you're creating variables. And the data types that we looked at, you still remember them. We had strings. A string is a group of text. I want you to listen very carefully here. It's really important, even when you're going to do other programmings. So we have string. A string is a group of is a group of text. We have integers. Integers, they are just numbers, like the way 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Those are numbers. Those are the ones that you call integers. Then you have floats. Floats, they are numbers with decimal points. And then we had double. Double, they are number with which are very huge. So those are the data types that Flutter supports. But sometimes you find that we have some serious data that we want to handle that that does not support, and want to access those variables in one place. For example, you're creating a student management system, and then you have something called student. So what does it mean? It means that when you're creating a variable like a student, that variable, when you access it, you should be able to access the student's name, the student country, the student's phone number, the student's age, all of them gathered together to one particular variable. But if you look at the data types of that programming language, the one that you have looked at, none of them supports all that thing being attached to a single variable. For example, a string. Can a string store a name and age and maybe the phone number of a student, all of them together? No. Why? Because we discussed and agreed that a string will only store a group of of text. So you find that there is a problem that when you're creating complex things like a student, you need to define your own rules. So assume that you're creating an e-commerce website, and maybe you want to store there some products. But you'll find a product will have different properties. A product will have a name. Just one product will have a name. That same product will have price. That same product will have maybe a photo. That same product will have details. So what does it mean? And you want to store all of these things together. So what does it mean? It means that when you're creating this product, when you're creating this product, you must be able to access them, all of them, under under one variable for simplicity. But the variables that programming give us, do they support all these things being stored together? Of course no. A string will not support that. An integer will only store numbers, just a single number. And a double will only store decimal points. So there's nothing that can store for you a custom variable that with all these properties that you want. So what does it mean? It means that there must be another way that we must find in order, if I declare something called maybe a product, it should be able to have the properties that I give to it. If I declare something called a student, it should be able to give a property. It must be able to have property that I give to it. If I declare something called something called a table, it must be having property that I give to it. So we find that they will reach a level where I want to make our own customized variables. So making the own customized variable is what we call a what? A class. So that programming supports that. And then to create a class, it means that you want to create something that you're going to give your rules, that you should be able to store a particular thing according to your rules. So you'll create a class. So a class will be like your variable. So you're going to create a variable, or it will be like a data type. So you're going to create a class of a student. So it means that that student will have the properties that you will be able to define. And when you initialize when you initialize a property called when you initialize something, when you initialize a variable of a class, it means that that particular variable will have all the properties that you gave to it. I conclude this. I say again, in that programming language, so far what we have looked at the data types, there is no data type that can accommodate your custom or your own rules. So if you want to create your own rules, that means that you must learn how to create a what? How to create a class. So when you create a class, you will define it and give it your own rules. Assume you're making a bank application, and you want to create something called transaction. So a transaction will be a class. So that class will have a sender. Maybe you'll have the account where the money came from, the account where the money is going, the amount, and maybe some details. That is a single transaction. So it means that every transaction will have those things wrapped together. So that means it will be just a different class. Assume that you're creating anything that you want to define your own rules. Those things are what we call what? They're what we call classes. So today, and that process of creating classes and objects is what we call object-oriented programming. So right now, you're going to learn how to create a class and how to create an object of a what? Of a class. So we are going to create a class called student. We'll use different examples. We'll use student, we'll use product, maybe we can use also one more if time allows. So we're going to create a class called student. In this class of called student, we're going to give it our own rules. And then we see how we can create different objects using this student. So let's do this right now. So I'm going to come here and open. I hope you guys will watch this video very carefully and understand these functions. So I'll come here to home, and then I'm going to open another file. I'm going to call it file number 11. I'm going to call it classes.dat. And then I'm going to create here my class. So to create a class, we just simply start with the word class, like this. Then after, you give this class a name. So as we agreed, we're going to call this class student. So we're going to call student like this. Don't use plural because it's going to be one object. So always avoid to use plural. And when you're defining a class, it's advised to always start with what? With capital letter. So I'm going to create my own variable, my own data type called student. So there it is. And then after doing that, you open the curly bracket here. If it was a function, you put bracket like this, but this is a class. So open curly bracket like this, and then you press enter, and then like that. So here, so we're going to put the code of what? Of this class. So what does it mean? We have created now our class called student. And that's how to create it, as simple as that. Then after creating a class of student, now we have to give it what? We have to give it properties. So properties, just like the way here properties, they are things that makes up a what? They are things that makes up a class. We are creating a class because we want to have our own what? Our own variable, or our own defined variable. So to create for it properties, it means that we must, to give it properties means that we are going to give it now our own things that we want this class to accommodate. For example, we are creating a class of a student. Let us first list properties of a student. A student will have a name. Those are the things that are called properties. Student will have a name, student will have age, student will have contact. And you can mention, they can even be 20, they can be 30, they can be as many as you want. But for us, we're going to define these ones. Okay? So I mean that these are the properties of what? Of a student. But you see, this is a comment. It's nothing. It's not going to do anything. So let's go ahead and define the first property of a student. So to define a property of a student, you define its data type. So the first one is going to be a name. So I'll just simply write string. And a name is a what? Is a string. So you write the word string like this, and then give the property of, the name of a property of this student, of this class. So I'm going to say name, and you can initialize to nothing by default. So by default, this name will be what? Will be nothing, okay? So that's our first property. Let's go ahead and create the second property, age. So our age is going to be an int, and going to be age by default is going to be 0. So can you see? I'm creating my own data type, okay? I'm going to create another property called contact. Contact, maybe it can be a string, and we give it contact, and by default contact, and by default we initialize it what? To nothing. So this is what we call a class. So this is a class of what? Of a student. You can add as many more as you want. So by doing like that, you'll have defined your own what? Your own data type. So if it is a product, you can consider different properties that a product can have and then define them. If it is a transaction, you can consider different properties that a transaction can have and then put them there. If it is a car, you can consider different properties that a car can have. If it is a user, so as many as you want. So me, I'm just giving you one example here called what? Called student, and you've seen the properties of what? Of a student. So after doing that, we are going to now, if I run this file, of course, it has no heart. And you know the heart of a that program. Void main, open bracket, color that line. So by doing like this, our product is going to do, our project is going to display nothing, and it's going to do nothing, totally nothing. Why? We just define, just like they could define functions. So here we also define a student class, but we are not using it, okay? So let's go ahead and run this. So it's going to be dash 11. So it's not displaying anything, you see? It's not displaying anything. Why? Because the main function starts from here and ends from here. And between the main function, I've not put anything. So now let us see how we can make use of this of this student class. So we are going to create an object, an instance of this student. So to create an instance of a student is what we call what? An object. So we are going to create a single object of the student. So remember, if we wanted to define an integer, we could just simply say int x equals to 20. What does it mean? It means that we have just created a variable called what? 20. Called x, and it's storing an integer and it's having value of what? Of 20. So likewise, if you want to create an instance or a variable of student or variable of a certain class, you just simply begin by defining the class name, student. Okay, so I can say student x. Okay, x we've already used it. Okay, student called John equals to new, and then it says student, and then open bracket and close it like this. So you see, it is almost like this one. This one is just for integers, you see, but this one is for student. So even if I wrap this one, you now understand. So what does it mean? When I do like this one, you see, I just simply call the name of the class, follow the name of the variable, and then equals to new, and then the name of the class with this bracket here. So by doing like that, I'll have created what? An instance of this class. So the instance of this class is what we call object. That's why I call this process, that's why I call it object-oriented programming. So this object will have everything that is it will have all the properties that are inside this what? Inside this class. If I want to access the properties inside this class through this object, I'll access them like this. So I want to define the name of this student, John. This is just a name of a variable, right? I can call it obj1. Okay? So if I want to define the name, of this object 1, what will I do? I'll just simply say obj1 dot. When I see dot, you see the suggestions. Suggestion comes, I have age, I have contact, I have name. And these are the properties of this class. I hope you guys you're connecting now. So if I can say dot name and then equal to maybe John Doe, put semicolon. I want to define this object's what? Age. Dot age equals to 33. I want to define this object's contact. Obj 1 dot what? Dot contact equals plus 88016325. Okay, so I put a semicolon. So what does it mean? I want you to look at the beauty. The beauty is we are able to access all these properties using what? Using one variable, and that variable is just an object of this class, of this type of class. So if we want to define the second variable, we just simply create new line obj2. So it means that I have now two different variables and they are separate. So if I want to also initialize for this second one, I just simply do the same thing and then just come and change this one, change this one, change this one. Maybe this is Joan Doe. Maybe she's 23 and that's her phone number. Okay, so you see, so these are two objects, but they are able to store 6 variables. So that's how we create a class, and that's how we use the values of a certain class. So let us go ahead and run this and you see what we'll have. Of course, we're going to have nothing on the screen. We're going to display nothing on the screen. Why? Because I've not dared to do what? To print. You see? Nothing is going to be displayed on the screen. So let's go ahead and display something on the screen. So to display something on the screen, we're just going to simply say print and then say for example, I'm going to put here name. So I'm going to put here name. I'm going to access the property of the certain object here. So I'm going to print the first object. So I'll put the $sign, put the curly bracket. You must put the curly bracket, okay? And then put obj 1 dot what? Maybe dot name. Then we'll be able to access the name of this first object. So if I want to access the age, just simply put dot age. If I want to access the contact, dot, now it's a contact. So I just simply put here dot contact. So I save, okay? So if I go and run this, I'll be able to display the first student. See? Name, John, age, that, contact, that. So that's how we create classes, and that's how we define objects. This is very, very, very important because now you can start relating that almost everything you're going to deal with is going to be in form of what? Of classes. You're going to create what are you going to create anyway? You're going to create maybe which system? Okay, an e-commerce system. Then those will be classes of products, classes of categories, classes of customers. So when you say a customer will have a name, a customer will have a phone number, a customer will have address, a customer will have maybe last seen, a customer will have the date when they registered. So all those are properties, but attached to only a single customer. So what does it mean? It means that when you're defining a customer, I mean when you're dealing with a customer, you have to define for them all these properties. So I hope you've understood here. So if I come and put this second object, let me put here some just print some that's going to separate these two. Okay, so I just simply come and change this one to 2 to 2, which is going to do the same thing. So you see, with object-oriented programming, you can even just duplicate things and then they go ahead straightforward. So let me clear the screen, run. I have an error. Let me see which error could it be. My first time to create an error. Here, I think I did not save because I don't see an error. Let me go ahead and run. Yeah, I did not save. So you can see. You can see. You can see I have the name, the first person, and I have the second person. But these are two different objects of a class called what? Of a class called student. Time will it allow? I wanted to. Okay, so that's how we create classes. So for now, we'll stop from there about classes, and we'll proceed with the classes and methods when we are what? When we go into mobile application development using now Flutter. So for now, this is all about classes. But when you proceed, when you are dealing with what? With mobile application development, when you are creating your applications, we'll go ahead and learn now how to deal with classes, how to implement these classes in real world. But when you watch this video, make sure that you search more deep about classes. I can share with you the notes. I'll share with you the notes so I can read more about what? About classes. As you can as well come and search from net. Why not? Why not? And learn more about classes. But when you proceed to that programming, I mean to mobile application for programming in what? In Flutter, you'll be able to do what? You see, this is a very good source of notes. Come and read here. Tutorials point. Read all about classes and understand. But for me, I've given you a glimpse. When we proceed to mobile application development, we'll come back to these classes and understand them so much deeply. But the task that I'll give you, you will be able to do what? To get started with classes. And the task that I'll give you will be able to create. I hope you'll be able to create something that can relate to this one. You just watch and do it. After doing it, the same thing, and then you try to change it in your own way. That's how you learn. You watch, do the same thing exactly. After doing the same thing exactly, then you try to create it in your own idea. Maybe you can now make something called car, and then you see what a car can have. A car can have the name, a car can have the model number, a car can have the price, a car can have. So you add those things when you're creating your own thing. So with that much said, the rest I'll give it in tasks. So let's just go ahead and now learn how to set up the environment of Flutter. That's a very enough introduction in that programming. Then the task that I'll give you, I'll make sure that it tests your skills and challenge you if you can really do good basics of that programming. So with that much said, let's go ahead and learn how to set up the environment of Flutter programming. So be careful here. You need to be so attentive because we're going now to go to practicals of mobile application using Flutter. So when you're going to create Flutter applications, you mainly need two things. You mainly need two things, two softwares. The first one is Android Studio, though people use also VS Code to create programs of Flutter, but still you can. The better way and the simplest way for you to get started is to use Android Studio. And then the second thing that you'll need is the SDK, the Flutter SDK. So I'm going to show you how we can set up a Flutter SDK, and I will also share the video that teaches you how to set up, just a complete video that shows practicals step by step. So the first thing, you have to download and install Android Studio. And to download and install Android Studio, you should be having a computer with at least 4 GB RAM. If you have less than 4 GB, then don't bother. You can just leave and wait or look for a better computer. So you should have, and also having at least 8 GB RAM. And then if you have SSD installed, that is very good. But still, if you don't have SSD, you can get started. But if you don't have SSD, then start looking for it if you want to get better experience when developing mobile applications. So there are the two things. One, Flutter SDK. The second thing is Android Studio. I'll share the video that show you step by step But here I'm also going to try to elaborate how to install Flutter 100 Studio in your computer. So step number 1, you have to download and install Android Studio. So download and install Android Studio, you just simply come to Google, as you can see, search, download Android Studio. So it's going to be your assignment before next class, and that will be before Thursday. So before Thursday, everyone should have set up their environment, and I'll check person by person. So this is what you'll get. The first search result, this one, download Android Studio SDK, or you can simply say Android Studio, just anywhere. Just click download Android Studio, this one. So you'll be taken to this place when you want to download Android Studio. Here, just come here to home, developers here, home, and this is what you'll see. Okay, so you have to download it. So to download it, we have Android Studio here, with this whatever, leave them, just come to this one straight, download Android Studio here. Now here you have to choose by simply clicking on this button. Okay, so for example, they have known I'm using Mac, so they'll just simply give my button here. See, straightforward. If you're using Windows, they'll also give you a button for Windows. Just click on it. You'll have to read these things if you have time. If you don't have time, just say I accept, and then here you'll be able to download. So if you're using M1 chip, you'll go for this one. For Mac, you know what I'm talking about. If you're using the Intel chip, you'll go for this one. But since if you're using Windows, there will be only one button for you for Intel. Now, I'm going to show how to download. So, for example, if I'm using M1 chip, I just simply click here, M1 chip. So, when you click, it will start downloading. Now, listen very carefully. This application is so heavy. It's very, very heavy. My internet is just because it's so good right now. But it is so heavy, to the extent that I can show you hours. It's just like 1 GB, right? So if you want to download something so heavy like this one, okay? If you want to download something so heavy like this one, you need one more extra application that will help you to download something heavy. People who you've heard of something called IDM, Internet Download Manager. But for me, the popular, the one that works for me really is called IDM. You can use it to download even movies and so many other things, but as long as something is so heavy, you can use that software to download for you. The advantage is, even if internet connection gets off, it has ability to do what? To resume. Even if you switch off your computer for 2 days, and when you turn it on, it will resume. But that is not possible for the browser. When internet connection goes off, the browser stops downloading, and then you have to start afresh, which is really painful. So after you've clicked here and started downloading, you just cancel it, but make sure to start downloading and then cancel it, or you can even pause it. So after doing that, you have to download a software called FDM. Just simply come to Google search and type in FDM like this, FDM. So here in FDM, just click on download here, download FDM. What is the use of this software? The use of this software is to help you download things efficiently. Even if your internet goes off, it has ability to do what? To resume. And it's even faster than what? Than browser. So that's why we need FDM. It's called Free Download Manager. So go ahead and click on download and install it. To install is just next step thing. So once it finishes installing, go ahead and open FDM. So I'm going to open my FDM. It will be like something like this. Whether you're using Windows or you're using Mac, it is having the same interface. Here it is. Okay. So here in FDM, you can download even movies, but I'll show you that another day. You can download YouTube videos. You can download so many things with FDM. but our purpose is download Android Studio. So come here, FDM, it has opened, it has installed. Now come back to your what? To your browser. Remember we downloaded Android Studio and cancelled it before it finishes. Then come to here, option, and then come to downloads. So in downloads, you'll see here a list of things that you've been downloading. So what we want here, we want only the link of what? Of Google, of Android Studio. You see, it is this thing that I've just cancelled. So to get the link, just right click here and then say copy link. Right click and then say copy link address. After copying, come back, make sure that you cancel it, because if you cancel it, you may end up downloading it twice. So after copying the link, come back now to FDM and click on this plus. Okay? So when you click on the plus to bring you the link and then say okay, it will process and then tell you what you're going to download. You see? So after making sure it has shown me what I want to download, I'll just go ahead and say download. So when it starts downloading, you see Google Chrome had told us 50 minutes, 22 minutes, but this one has reduced them to 23 minutes. So it reduces them. It is really faster than browser. Let me pause it because I don't need it. So when you put it there and start downloading, even if your internet connection goes off, this one has ability to resume. When you connect again, it will be able to do what? Resume. Even if your computer goes off, I understand internet connection problem. Even if your computer goes off, you will be able to do what? To resume. So those ones in Uganda have internet problem, you can buy the night data. The night data, you can buy like your 2 GB freely, cheaply, and then use that 2 GB after midnight to download this Android Studio. So the Android Studio will take its time to download, it will wait, and when it finishes downloading, let me delete it, I don't need it. When it finishes downloading, it will be here. Just double click on it. These are some movies. When I'm free, I can watch some movies. So you just double click on it, and then it will be able to do what? To start installing. So that's how we download Android Studio. And I'm coming back to that, okay? So after downloading Android Studio, the next thing that you need to download is the Flutter SDK. Just like you remember how we did with that SDK. So the next thing that you have to download here is the Flutter SDK. So to download Flutter SDK, just simply come and say download. Okay, so download Flutter SDK like that. Okay, so you'll see the first search result. So click here, Flutter 2.1 is here, or anywhere. Okay, so here you'll get some introduction about Flutter. So you have to download it. Where do you download it? Sometimes it can be challenging, you may not know. A lot of adverts. Get started. Okay, yeah, here just click on get started, then they'll take you to the download space. So here, under get started, you choose your operating system. If you're using Windows, go for Windows. Okay, so and then after you'll see this zip. Download Flutter from here. So what you do, you move your mouse like the way we talked. You don't want to download it straight from the browser because it's a little bit heavy. So move your mouse over this button, right click on it, and then say copy link. Or you can as well download it and then go to downloads and copy the link. But you can here you can as well copy link from here because there's no need of accepting terms and whatever. Right click on it and then say copy link address. Okay, click on copy link address and then come to what? Come to our FDM and click on the plus. Okay, click on this plus. Okay, someone should mute, maybe Odek Peter. Okay, so you click on the plus. After copying the link, after make sure you copy the link of Flutter, click on the plus and then say click OK. So when you click OK, this is what we'll get. This is going to go in this folder, what and what. Then I'll go ahead and do what you see. It is also 900 MB, so it is also another 1 GB. So you need like at least 3 GBs to get started. click on what? Click on download. Okay, click on download, then it will start also downloading. Okay, so mine is showing 16 minutes, but yours can show more than that or less than that. So I have it, I don't need it. Okay, so that SDK is going to download for you what? A zip, like you remember how it was in that SDK. So Flutter SDK, it is also going to be a zip. So you're going to copy that zip and put it in a folder. You see the folder where you put that SDK. So below that SDK, unzip it and put also there a folder of what? Of Flutter. Okay? After doing that, then install Android Studio. After installing Android Studio, and then you'll open the Android Studio. Open Android Studio. I hope members are following, because it's going to be assignment before next class. I may allow only people who have set up their environment. Okay? So this is how Android Studio will look like on your computer. Okay? So when you're setting up Flutter for the first time, you just simply come here to settings. I mean here to settings. No, somewhere. Somewhere where you'll find settings. You can just simply come here and under Android Studio, okay? But come where there is settings, and then not there. I think plugins. Yeah, come to plugins here. They have made the shortcut. Every day they are changing their interface. So you'll find the shortcut where there's word plugin. Sometimes it's under a settings icon. So if you don't have this plugins part, you'll find it under some settings icon, Okay, you'll find it under a setting icon, but here they have made it very clearly. You see, plugins. So come to the tab of plugins, and then under this tab of plugins, search for something called Flutter, and then go ahead and install it by just simply clicking on it. But for me, I already have it, so you just click on it and it will install. It is very fast. It can take like less than 2 minutes to install. It will ask you to install another plugin called Dart. So this is Dart. It is already installed. So you just say, okay, you can begin with Dart and then Flutter. And this Dart is just a plugin, so the Dart SDK. So it's just that plugin. So click Dart and so click Flutter. Install these two plugins. And after installing these two plugins, now go ahead and create it. And they will ask you to restart your Android Studio. You'll restart it. After restarting it, you'll be able to create your first project of what? Of Flutter. To create the first project of Flutter, just simply come to File, or just simply come here to Projects, and then you'll see here a button called New Flutter Project. This button will not appear until you have installed Flutter SDK, you have done that, and then you have set up the Flutter plugin, then this button will appear. So to create a Flutter project, just simply come to New Flutter Project. Now, the thing that they will ask you is the path. You see? Listen very carefully here. If you're for the very first time, or if they don't even ask you, they will ask you the path. The interface may not look like this, but use your brain, common sense. They will ask you the path where you put your Flutter SDK. I repeat, they will ask you to specify the path where you put your Flutter SDK. You remember, after downloading Flutter SDK, we unzipped it and get the unzipped folder, and we saved it under where we saved the Dart SDK. So here we'll have to specify where we put the Flutter SDK. By simply coming, you click here, but mine is already specified. You click here. So for you who are using Windows, you go to C, you go to where, and go where there's a folder, of Flutter. See? Let me change this one to columns. You see mine? It is here. So I got the folder where there is Flutter. I open that folder and then click on open. Just the first folder where there is Flutter. Open the folder Flutter until you see things like this one. Bin, examples, packages. Where you see things like this one. In your Flutter SDK. Then you click on open. Then your path should look something like this. Should be something like this. But if you're using Windows, it will be like C stroke src stroke then the Flutter folder. Okay, so what it should end with the word Flutter where you saved your things, and then click next, and then you'll be able to create your first project. Just simply say first app or my first application, my first app. Okay, and then you can leave these other things, we can explain them later. Okay, after doing that, then say click finish. So after doing that, this should be in small letters, first app, something like that, then say click finish, and then it will be able to do what? To create for you your first mobile application. So it will show you something like this. Let me show you. This is what has shown. It just opened me on another screen. So you see, it will show you something like this. So these other Chinese that you may not understand here, it is where we'll begin from in the next class. So do good to yourself. Make sure that before the next class, you can be able to initialize something like this. So by doing like this, if you have connected your phone, you can just simply click on run, and this application will be able to run on your mobile phone. Okay, I will show you how to do everything after here in the next class. But make sure before the next class on Thursday, you're able to create something that will look like this. If you have enough energy, you can go ahead and learn from another teacher and get started with creating real mobile applications after here. But if you're patient, you can still wait, and in the next class, we'll start from here. So those are the steps that we follow when you're setting up the environment. I'll also share the video that is straightforward that can help you to do what? To set up your Flutter environment on Windows, and if you're using Mac, I'll also share that one of what? Of Mac. So I hope there is no question. If there is any, you can put it forward because our time is over, and then I can allow you to proceed to other businesses. But the simple thing is, by next class, you should be able to set up your Flutter environment, and also you should be able to understand functions and also what is meant by classes and objects, object-oriented programming. So that is it for today. So by Thursday, make your hands dirty. Try to search from other teachers, from what, and make sure that at least you are on the same point with us. Otherwise, if you don't do that, then I have no way I can help you. For me, I've just tried my best. So that's it for today, members, unless there is a question. If there's no question, you're free to leave, and I wish you a good night. Your time is up.